Every great civilization that has ever existed believed it would last forever. Rome believed it. The Maya believed it. The Bronze Age superpowers believed it. They were all wrong, and they all collapsed for the same reasons. Historians have spent decades studying every major civilizational collapse in recorded history. They found 8 patterns, the same 8, every time, across 5,000 years. We are currently showing 6 of them. And before you dismiss that, you need to understand what collapse actually looks like from the inside, because it doesn't look like what you're imagining. It doesn't look like an explosion. It doesn't look like a sudden catastrophe that everyone sees coming. It looks like a slow Tuesday. Historian Brian Ward Perkins studied the collapse of the Western Roman Empire and found something that should change how you think about everything. The people living through it had no idea. Not for decades. Sometimes not for generations. Markets opened, children went to school, people argued about politics, worried about money, fell in love. And the whole time, the foundations were cracking. Rome at its height, 1 million people in the capital, literacy rates that wouldn't be matched in Europe for over 1,000 years, trade networks spanning 3 continents, running water, centralized food supply. Within 2 generations of the fall, literacy had collapsed by an estimated 90%. Rome's population shrank to 20,000. The water stopped running. The roads stopped being repaired. The people who lived through it didn't write, "Today the empire fell." They wrote about their Tuesday, now. The 8 patterns. Pay attention, because by the time we get to number 6, something is going to feel uncomfortably familiar. Pattern 1. Wealth concentrates until the social contract breaks. Every collapsing civilization shows the same curve. Wealth accumulates at the top. The middle hollows out. Those at the bottom fall further and further behind. This alone doesn't collapse a civilization. But it does something that makes collapse inevitable. It destroys the reason ordinary people defend the system. When people stop believing the rules apply equally, when effort stops being reliably rewarded, they stop maintaining what exists. They stop paying taxes. They stop joining armies. They stop trusting institutions. The civilization doesn't fall because the enemies outside got stronger. It falls because the people inside stopped caring whether it survived. Pattern 2. The empire becomes too expensive to maintain. Rome spent its final centuries defending borders so vast that the military consumed everything else. Infrastructure crumbled. Trade routes went unprotected. The bureaucracy grew while the productive economy shrank. Historians call it imperial overstretch. The cost of being an empire exceeds what the empire produces. It becomes a machine that exists only to feed itself. Pattern 3. The environment turns hostile. The Bronze Age collapse, the most catastrophic civilizational collapse in recorded history, destroyed virtually every major civilization in the Eastern Mediterranean, simultaneously, in less than 50 years, around 1200 BC, triggered, at least in part, by a prolonged drought that severed supply chains connecting civilizations across the Mediterranean for centuries. The Maya, drought. The Khmer Empire, monsoon failure. The Tang Dynasty, floods, then drought. A civilization already under stress doesn't recover from environmental crisis. It tips. Pattern 4. The political system stops governing and starts fighting over who governs. Rome's final century, 37 emperors in 50 years. Most were assassinated by the same people who appointed them. The government wasn't governing. It was consuming itself. Political institutions exist to solve collective problems. When they become primarily vehicles for factional warfare, when winning becomes more important than governing, the problems don't get solved. They stack up until the stack falls. Pattern 5. External pressure, but not the kind you think. The barbarians didn't defeat Rome. Rome had been defeating barbarians for centuries. What changed wasn't the threat outside. What changed was Rome's ability to meet it. The same pressure that Rome absorbed easily in the 2nd century AD, when its institutions functioned, its economy was strong, its people trusted the system, became fatal in the 5th century, when none of those things were true. External enemies are never the real story. They are the final push on something that was already falling. Pattern 6. The civilization loses its shared story. Every civilization runs on a narrative. Who are we? What do we stand for? What are we building together? Why does any of this matter? When those answers fracture, when people within the same civilization have completely incompatible answers, something deeper than the economy breaks, the will to maintain what exists. By Rome's end, the armies defending it were largely composed of soldiers who didn't think of themselves as Roman. They were defending a salary, not a civilization. A civilization whose people no longer share a reason to exist together, doesn't. 6 patterns. Wealth inequality at historic highs in most of the world's major economies. Political institutions so gridlocked they struggle to address problems everyone agrees exist. Environmental stress already disrupting food and water systems globally. Military and financial overextension. Rising external pressures, geopolitical competition, mass displacement, resource scarcity. And a fracturing of shared identity so complete that citizens of the same country now inhabit almost entirely different realities. 6 of the 8, right now, documented, measurable, undeniable. Take a breath, because before you spiral, 2 things you need to hear. First, these patterns do not make collapse inevitable. The Byzantine Empire, the eastern half of Rome, survived for 1,000 years after the West fell. Because it did what the West didn't, it reformed its institutions before they failed completely. It saw the pattern, it adapted, it survived. Collapse is not a law of nature. It is what happens when adaptation fails. And adaptation has not failed yet. Second, civilizational collapse does not mean the end of the people in it. The Romans didn't disappear. They became the people of medieval Europe. Life continued, harder, yes, reorganized, yes, but continued. What ends is not the people. What ends is the complexity, the trade networks, the medicine, the literacy, the accumulated knowledge that took centuries to build. A civilization can lose 1,000 years of progress in a generation. That is what makes collapse worth preventing. Not the flag, not the institutions, the knowledge, the things that took that long. Here is what every historian who studies collapse eventually says. In retrospect, it was always obvious. The exact decisions that made it inevitable, the exact moments where the course could have changed. All of it, clear, when you look back. The people living through it couldn't see it. Not because they were foolish, because they were inside it. We are inside something right now. And for the first time in human history, we have something no collapsing civilization has ever had. The complete record of every civilization that came before us. The patterns, the warnings, the precise moments where things could have gone differently and didn't. We can see what they couldn't. The question, the one that follows you out of this video, that should follow you, is whether seeing it is enough. Whether knowing the pattern for the first time in history is enough to break it. Every civilization before us got to find out the answer. Now it's our turn. Tau seconds of silence. If that just changed how you see something, good. That is exactly what Hmmward is for. New question every week. Subscribe, because the next one is going to be just as uncomfortable as this one.